Hey everyone, in this video we're going to take a look at part 41 of the Hercules story from Ritchie's Fabulae Faciles. Now this chapter is called Hercules Crosses the Styx. Now for the past few chapters, Ritchie's been giving us sort of an overview of the underworld, what it's like, what's there, how it all kind of functions, and now we're coming back to the actual Hercules story. As you see, he's trying to get through the underworld so he can get the dog Cerberus, right? That's his 12th labor. So before we dive too far into it, like I always tell you in these videos, the first thing you want to do is make sure you have the vocab under control, just because it's almost impossible to read this without knowing what the words are, right? No matter how good your grammar is, knowing the vocab is always the first sort of key to it. So I'd encourage you to find a vocab list, or if you want to pre-read and make one your own, feel free. But make sure you really know the words well. That way you're ready to move forward. The second thing you want to do is you want to read the story aloud. So if you can find a classmate, read it to them, practice your speaking, your pronunciation. They can read the story back to you. You can work on your listening skills. You never want to shut those off because they will help you get better at Latin. So you don't want to turn those parts of your brain off. The last thing I'd encourage you to do is try the read and reread method. So I say this in all my videos, but I can say from working with my students, it works. It's a really good way to kind of shore up any difficulties you're having and really nail each chapter as you go. You want to read through the story, right, the first time, write down any problem areas you have. So it might be vocab, it could be grammar, it could be whatever it is, a sentence, a chunk of a sentence, write it down in a list, read through the whole story, and when you're done, go back and look at your list, right? And try to figure out where you went wrong. If it's vocab, it's really easy. You just look up the word and you'll be able to figure it out. The grammar might be a little bit trickier, but there's a bunch of commentaries out there you can find. Or you might be able to piece through it on your own and see, like, oh, I said this when I meant to translate it that way. You just want to kind of work your way through and then go back and read the story again, okay? And on the second, third, fourth time, you just keep doing this over and over until you can hit a point where you can read through this chapter, translate it pretty close to perfect, right? Understand everything or almost everything, and you don't need any help from a commentary or a vocab list or anything like that. That's always the sign that you're ready to move on, okay? So if you haven't done that yet, of course, go do that, right? Work on the story on your own, but if not, continue on with the video. Once you feel like you're in a good place, and just use it as a double check. Not that my translation is ever perfect, but it'll give you a sort of a guide to make sure that you're on the right track. So let's dive in. The chapter starts like this. Remember, we've picked up the story where Hercules is trying to get into the underworld. So you have Hercules, postquam imperia juristie accepit, in Laconiam ad Tainarum statum se contulit. Ibi enim spelunca erat ingenti magnitudine perquam ut tradibator, homines ad orcum descendebant. Okay, so we have sort of a longer sentence here, a couple pieces. But it starts with Hercules, right? After he caped, he received the orders of Eurystheus, right? So he received the orders from Eurystheus, and he knows, he has to go and basically get Cerberus back. He se contulit. So se contulit literally means something like he carried himself, but you could say he brought himself. He kind of hustled off to Laconia, right? So in Laconium, so he brought himself into Laconia, which is southern Greece, and he came immediately, right? Statum, he came to Tainaris, right? So Tainaris, they're about to explain it, is a city in southern Greece, right? And it's rumored that it has a cave that could get you into the underworld, and that's what we're about to see, in the second half of this sentence. So he goes to Tainaris. Then you have Ibi, meaning there, right, in Tainaris. Enimibi, so for there was a spelunca, right? There was a cave. And then we have this phrase again, ingenti magnitudine, which we've seen before, this ablative quality. You can translate it as this cave of great size, right, or of huge size, right, magnitude, right, through which ut tradibator, as it was, held, as it was said, right. Think of the word tradition here. Homines, men, descendebant, they were descending or descended ad orcum, to Orcus, right, which is the underworld. So there's this idea that if you go to the cave in Tainaris, you can make your way into the underworld. And you can see in the picture here that area is obviously around today. You can see it, and you can see where these caves are that would kind of lead to this being the myth of how you get into the underworld. Okay. So after he has his instructions, he goes to find his way to the underworld. And you have next, you have eo cum venisset, ex incolis quaesivit quo in loco spelunca illa sita esset, quod cum cognovisset sine mora descendere constituit. Okay, so when he had come, right, when is it to that place, Ao? So when he had come there to that place, to the cave, quaesivid, he asked, right, ex incolis, from the inhabitants, so from the people living there, he asked in what place, in quo loco, right, quo and loco here, but in what place the spelunca, the cave, esset sita, was situated, was located. right? Where that cave, illa, where that cave was located. Okay, and this is all eset here is subjunctive because you have an indirect question. So he's asking people something, but we don't have the direct quote. That's why you're seeing subjunctive going on. Then you have quod cum cognovicit. So when he had found out, right? So when he had found out, where he's supposed to go, sine mora, without delay, he decided, right, constituit descendere, to go down. Okay, so he asked where it was located. Then you have which, when he found out, right, the relative there, he decided to go right in. So he sees the cave, he finds the cave, and he heads right in without stopping. Okay. Then we keep going. You have nectamen solus hoc iter faciebat Mercurius enim et Minerva se ei socios adjunxerat. Okay, so he doesn't go by himself, right? So he's got gods with him, which is what we're seeing here. You have, however, next solus, so not alone was he making this journey, hoc iter faciebat, right? So he didn't make this journey alone. He has Mercurius, right, which is Mercury, and Minerva, right? Minerva, or Athena in Greek, right? So Mercury and Minerva, they adjunxerat, they had joined joined themselves, rather say, they had joined themselves to him. You have the dative there, going with the compound verb. And then you have socios, as allies, right? So they had joined themselves to him as allies. So he doesn't have to go by himself. He's got this sort of immortal help with him. Okay? Then it continues, and you have ubi ad ripam stiges venet Hercules scapham carontis conscendit, rather, ut ad ulteriorem ripam transire. So when he came to the Ripam Styx, right, to the bank, the river bank of the Styx, remember the river Styx is one of the rivers of the underworld. So when he came there, Hercules, he climbed aboard, you could say, conscendit, right, he climbed onto the Scapham Carontis, right, the boat of Charon. Remember, Charon is the ferryman, so his little scapha, his little ferry boat, basically. And then you have a purpose clause here, the ut, right, with the subjunctive. So he did this so that he might cross, transiret, to the further bank, ad ulteriorem ripam. So he needs to cross to the other side. He hops onto the boat of Charon, which we saw in the previous chapters is how you get across the river in the underworld. Okay? And it keeps going. And you have cum tam and Hercules vir esset ingenti magnitudine corporis cauron solere nolebat. Magna per enim verebatur ne scapha sua tanto pondere onerata in medio flumine mergeretur. So we have, again, two pieces here. But you have, however, since, right, the cum here is really probably best translated as since Hercules was, right, there's your subjunctive with the cum clause, esset, since he was a man, and here we have the exact same phrase again, the ingenti magnitudine, of great size, corporus, of body, right? It's referring to his body here. You have the genitive corporus. So since he was such a massive human being, remember Hercules is this muscular demigod, right? Since he's such a huge man, Charon, right, Charon, solere nolebat, he didn't want to set sail, right, solere, so he doesn't want to leave. And he tells you why. For he magnaper, he greatly verebatur, he was greatly afraid or feared that his boat, scapha sua, right, his own little raft there, it might mergeretur, it might sink, right? So he was afraid that it might sink in medio flumine, in the middle of the river. So why would it sink? Well, the scapha is described with onerata, having been burdened with tanto pondere, with such weight, right? You have this fear clause of what he's afraid of here. So being burdened by carrying Hercules, he's afraid that his boat is going to, mergeretur, right, is going to submerge. You can think of that word, but just sink into the river because it's too heavy. Okay? Then you have the last line. You have tandem tamen, minis Hercules territus caron scapham solvet et eum incolumem ad ulteriorem ripam perduxit. Okay, so however, at last, right? So tandem tamen. So at last, however, territus. This is describing Charon. So Charon is the subject here. Charon. He's described as being territus, terrified from the minis Hercules, from the threats of Hercules. Right, the minis are his threats. So Hercules is yelling at him, saying, "I'm gonna, bash you in the head or something if you don't get me across this river." So finally, being terrified by these threats, Charon he set sail on his scapha, right, his boat. So he sailed the boat. And he perduxit, he led him, right, in columem, unharmed, to the ulteriorem ripam, to the further bank, right, to the other side of the bank. So he brings Hercules across, and now Hercules has successfully sort of made his way into the underworld. Okay, so hopefully this chapter was pretty straightforward to understand. You were able to do it without too much difficulty. There are a couple tricky parts in there, but if you have any questions at all, feel free to put them in the comments below. Of course, I'll help you and explain anything you need. Again, my translation is never perfect. It's just meant to be a guide to kind of help you understand, and hopefully you're feeling pretty good about it on your own after doing your work and seeing this video, and you're ready to move on. All right, good luck with it. Keep at it, and again, you're aiming for that point where you can read through this without needing any help. That's how you always know that you're ready for the next chapter. Good luck.